Jesus' ministry is in full swing. He's at the height of his popularity, and everywhere he goes, people are following him. People are coming because, well, Jesus is providing solutions. He's bringing answers to their physical and their mental and their spiritual needs. Oh, needs that just are every day in people's lives. They're following because something has changed. Changed for the better. Something that they see being done in the lives of those that are around Jesus Christ causes them to want to come because of what they see happening. And when we look at this as an example, we have to question, we have to wonder, why is it then today that we don't still see the same draw to Jesus Christ? If Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, if the same salvation, the same healing, the same deliverance, the same change for the better that brought hordes of people to the shores of Galilee to see Jesus, to touch him, to follow him, then why today isn't every church that seeks after Jesus Christ just packed to the rafters? Why is it that people are not being drawn? And I know that it's easy sometimes when we look out to try to figure out what's lacking. And this morning I don't want to go to the extreme of talking about global issues or problems in our nation or in our state. I just want to talk about what's happening on the local front. What's happening internally rather than necessarily looking at what's happening externally. Mark's gospel, we see here multitudes are coming to the Lord. They're following after Jesus because they see the power of God in those who've already touched him, and therefore they want to touch that power. The question is, what do people see in our community when it comes to the church? What do people see in relationship to the power of God? Do they see those that are following Jesus as those that have been healed? Those that have been lame and now are walking, those that were dead and now come to life? Do they see lives being changed and transitioned and transformed for the better? I want you to hold that thought because I believe that what we see in these next few verses is going to give us some insight as to how it is that we would look at those questions and be able to come up with an answer. When we last left off, Jesus had told his disciples to come away with him to a deserted place. And boy, they were looking for some R&R. Things had been so busy they didn't even have time to eat. Everywhere they went, people pressing in. The crowds were on them constantly. And Jesus says, let's go to a secluded place, get in the boat, and we're going to go get away from everybody. Well, the duration of the rest that they were about to receive was going to be equal to a boat ride across the Sea of Galilee. Because what was happening is that everybody knew where they were. You know, it's hard to hide in the middle of a body of water. Look at what it says in verse 32. So they departed to a deserted place in the boat by themselves, but the multitudes saw them departing, and many knew him and ran there on foot from all the cities. And they arrived before them and came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw the great multitude and was moved with compassion for them because they were like sheep not having a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. When the day was now far spent, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and already the hour is late. Send them away that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." So the disciples and the Lord depart. They head over across the Sea of Galilee, and the journey would have taken about a day. It was a slow row, if you would call it such. And they were going to make themselves very casually over to the other side. A little downtime, again, a little R&R. The problem, Jesus is so popular that people are watching from the shore. And people are rushing around the shore. They're looking at the direction of the boat, and they figured, okay, they're heading over in that direction. So they would run around the shoreline, and they would, oh, no, they're going a little further. And then the other people would come from the other way. And you can imagine what it would be like if people were literally running around a body of water about the size of Lake Tahoe trying to track a boat that was moving across slowly. So that when they get to the other side, when they pull in, the first thing that happens is that the multitude is waiting. And I love what it says about Jesus. I know what my first thought would have been. Man, will you guys leave me alone? I can't catch a break everywhere I go. But Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus shows up on the shore, and instead, it says he was filled with compassion because he saw the need. He saw them as a shepherd would see sheep in need of being led, and in this case, led to God. Jesus and his disciples, though, they were tired. They'd been ministering nonstop to the people that were pushing and pulling and had an endless line of need, and yet not having time to eat. Now try as they may, there was no relief. They couldn't get away. And so what seems like a great opportunity, his disciples say, hey, we've got an idea. They're hungry, we're hungry, there's no food in this place. Jesus, send them away so that they can go get something to eat. See, these guys were just all about the needs of the people. They were more concerned with the needs, so we need to send them away in order for them to go get something to eat. And I love the fact that these guys were problem solvers. I mean, I really do. I mean, you got to look at the makeup of what was going on here. We had fishermen, we had tax collectors, we had zealots, we had just everyday guys, right? And they saw a problem. What was the problem? I'm hungry. I'm tired. And these people won't give us a break. Oh, I have an idea. Let's send them away because they need a break. They need to go and find something to eat. The solution, very simple. I'm hungry, go away. But he answered and said to them, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? Oh, man. Jesus has a different plan. Jesus says, you give them something to eat. And they went, right. Yeah, that's going to happen. That's not even a plan, Lord. That's not even something that's going to happen. How in the world are we supposed to feed all of these people? Now, we're going to see, and we know that the numbers were somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 men. I mean, this isn't like, oh, we need to just pull together a potluck for a few people at church. Okay? When these guys are looking at this, they're pointing out an obvious flaw in the plan. They're not saying, oh, well, should we take 2,000 denarii and go buy something to eat? They're saying, are you crazy? Even if there was a place to buy bread, even if there was a place to get bread, we don't have the money. There's no way in the world. 2,000 denarii was a lot of money. You're talking about buying lunch for thousands and thousands and thousands of people. They just went, Lord, you got to be kidding. You can't be serious. After all, their response was based in reality. They knew what reality was. They knew they didn't have the money. They knew there was no means by doing this, and yet it was also wrapped in a lack of faith. They were concerned about their own bellies, their own rest, providing food for themselves, and therefore the idea of feeding others was totally off the table. It's like, you got to be kidding. There's no way. Lord, we started out on this trip. Remember? This trip was supposed to be about us. Have you ever had people impose on you when you were trying to do something for yourself and you didn't like it? Anybody besides me? This trip is supposed to be about, this was supposed to be our retreat. This was supposed to be about our rest and our relaxation. This was supposed to be a little me time. Not a them time, not a those time, not an others time. This was supposed to be just about my needs, me getting something to eat, me getting some rest. And so therefore, for these folks to become the need now is not in my plan. But Jesus says, I want you to feed them. And I love what's happening here. Their response, Lord, it's impossible. Do you guys realize that we have a Lord that is into the impossible? I love the fact that he's always willing to provide exactly what we need. And let me tell you what, God, if he asks you to do that which is impossible for you, he will provide you with that which you need to do the impossible. We call that where God guides, he provides. And it's so true. Our part is to believe him. Our part is to trust him. And it amazes me how many times we see Jesus doing something that is impossible in front of these guys, And yet they still go to the place of, we can't. It's not possible. We don't have the means. And you want to look at these guys and go, what's wrong with you? Until you realize that we do the same thing. Until you realize that it's just our nature. And more so mine than some, because I am an eternal pessimist. I am. I'm good at it. I'm good. I call it being a realist, but really I'm just a pessimist. I will always look at the glass as being half empty rather than being half full. It's just my nature. And so it causes me and allows me to be a great problem solver, but it also causes me to come to the conclusion that the problem is beyond what we can do very easily and very readily. Nope, we can't do that. And then somebody will come, well, yeah, we can if we do this. Nope. I don't think so. Well, you go give them something to eat. Nope. We don't have, and if we could buy it, we don't have enough money for it, so there's no way for us to do that. And so I get where these guys are coming from. The question is that are we willing to, at some point in time, to get out of what we think we can do in the name of Jesus and allow Jesus to drive that which he wants us to do beyond all capacity that we have? We need to understand the principle of trusting God in the impossible can be great or small. I mean, there's been times in our lives where I think that it's been a great call, coming out and establishing a church and coming out and stepping out in faith the way that we have. We're getting ready to do another great venture of faith in relationship to adding on and growing the building here and expanding in place. It's going to be fantastic, and it's going to be a venture of faith. We're going to have faith to step out in that. But you know, more often than not, when Jesus wants us to do the impossible, it's not about something that is a great calling or a great ministry or something that is so big that we can't see any way around it. Most of the time, it's the things that happen in our everyday life. Most of the time, it's the things that we just struggle with, and we don't know why we struggle. It's not even maybe something that's really big. Maybe it's an addiction, or maybe it's a place where you go that you shouldn't go. Maybe it's a thought that you have that you shouldn't have. Maybe it's a conversation that you have. Maybe it's something that is just a matter of habit that you know is something that isn't pleasing to the Lord, and yet you haven't been able to overcome it because it's impossible. Guys, this is where we fall down. We fall down in our ability to trust and obey the call that God has for us, because in order to grow, in order to have abundance of faith, we have to have abundance of circumstance that allow us to grow our faith. And we don't like that. I don't know about you, but I try at all costs to avoid things that cause me pain. I will take the path of least resistance whenever I can. My wife hates this. We pull into the parking lot. Man, she hates it because I'll pull right up in front and look for the closest parking place. Drives her crazy because she's always afraid I'm going to run over some kid or some grandma pushing a cart or something. I want to find and if there's one right up front that's coming open, I'll wait for it. She goes, there's 1,000 parking places. I said, yes, but they're 100 yards away. Or 6 yards. I'm always trying to save energy. Yeah, amen. We only have so much. Someday it's going to run out, so if I can save some, right? And then she says, well, then why do you wear that little thing on your hand? It tracks your steps if you're not going to make more steps. It's like, I don't know. But look at what Jesus says to him. How many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. So Jesus basically is saying, I know you don't have enough. I know that there's no way that you can do this. Now, I'm not sure how hard they looked. I mean, I know how hard I would look. Anybody got anything to eat out there? Oh, and we know that this represents like a sack lunch for a kid. All right? 5 loaves and 2 fish. I mean, this isn't like, oh my goodness, this is a lot of food. This is just like a snack, right? So I can see them coming up to the Lord going, okay, we're going to show him just how ridiculous his idea is. Lord, this is all we have. And I think that they were extremely satisfied with their efforts. I think that they were completely satisfied that they had tried, that they had looked, that there was not the means in order for them to be able to rise to the challenge that God had placed before them, that Jesus had instructed them in, and so that they were very, very settled with saying, we can't do it. The reason I know that is because I know that there's been times in my life when I've been very, very settled with the idea that it's okay, I've given it the best effort that I've got, and it can't be done, and I'm okay with that. These guys were exactly right. They did not have what it took to make this happen. There wasn't any way that they could come up with the means of feeding this many people in a secluded place. There was no way, and I'm sure, again, in their minds, they were completely satisfied. But instead of joining in and Jesus going, oh, that's all we got? Yeah, okay. He says, no. He says, bring it here. What have you got? Bring whatever you've got. See, it doesn't matter how much we have or how little we have. What matters is are we willing to bring it to Jesus? Are we willing to trust Him with what we have, no matter if it's great or if it's small? Are we willing to bring Him what we have? It's easy to sit back and think that somehow or another that what we have isn't enough. How many of you in here, and just be honest, it's okay, you're in church, you need to be. How many of you, regardless of what it would potentially be, wish that you had more of something? Be honest. Yeah. See, it's our nature. Even if it's like time. Oh, I wish I had more time. There's not anybody in here that doesn't wish you had more time, right? Because if you had more time, then you could do more stuff. That's probably the stuff that's taking up your time. So more time means more stuff that takes up your time and wastes your time, so then you would need more time. Oh. We like this idea of being prepared. We like this idea of being able to take and come to this place of knowing that we have all that we need, and therefore if we have all that we need, then, well, we can limit God to what we see as our capacity rather than allowing Him to establish the level in which we operate. I think one of the biggest inhibitors that we have comes from a lack of seeing our potential growth based on what we have. And the enemy loves for us to compare what we have and who we are to others in order to demonstrate what we don't have. That's interesting. The other day I was out working in the garage, and we've got a TV that's over in the corner, and it was just playing, and I don't know what was on, but what came on was one of these infomercials for these get-rich plan, right? And it's got this guy driving this really cool, expensive car, and the camera is like right in his face, and he's talking really loud and being really, really forceful. You know, the only problem you have is that you're not grabbing your full potential. You need to release your full potential, and you too. And I'm thinking, man, this guy's full of it. Yeah. But if you just bought his plan and you would buy his book, he would show you how to release all of your potential. And he was saying, there are 1,700 new millionaires made in this country a day. You could be one of them. And I thought, And the first thing I really thought is, I bet that car's a rental. He had one thing right, though. The one thing that he had right is he said, you can start with whatever you have. Whatever you've got is enough to start. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Okay, if that's the way we look at it, then what am I looking at? What am I seeing as my resource in relationship to what it is that God would have me to do? First off, we have salvation. First off, we have favor with God. We have this ability and this position to know that as children of God, that the resources of our God are unlimited. So that means that my resources must be what? Unlimited. Wow. Wow, you mean that I can tap in and do anything? You mean that I could do just about all things through Jesus, through Christ, who strengthens me. Whose resource am I tapping? Am I tapping my resource? Am I looking at what it is that I have in order to be able to see what can be done? Or am I looking at what he has in order to see what can be done? How is it that he's able to take, in just a moment, we're going to see that he's going to take this little portion of food and he's going to use it to multiply, to feed thousands and thousands and thousands of people, quite to the surprise, shock, and awe of his guys. Look at what it says. Then he commanded them to make them sit down in groups on the green grass, and they sat down in ranks in hundreds and in fifties. And when he had taken up the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, and he blessed, and he broke the loaves, and he gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. So they all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets of full fragments and of the fish. Now those who have eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men. Now, if there's 5,000 men, how many women are there? In church, what have we already discovered? That any time that there's a church gathering, there's normally 2 to 1 when it comes to twice as many women as there are men. Right? It's just how it works out. So there had to be a lot of women. And if there were women there, where were the kids? With the women. Could have fed somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20,000 people. 5 biscuits and 2 fish. Wow, those are pretty good odds. But what was even more amazing is at the end of it, they took up 12 baskets, 12 full baskets of fragments of food left over. And I think that it was purposed. I think that it was so that each one of the disciples had their own basket full of food. We can't. You're going to go buy 2,000 denarii. I mean, you shut them up, didn't it? What are they thinking now? How are we going to keep all this food from spoiling? Immediately, he made his disciples get in the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida. While he sent the multitude away, and when he had sent them away, he departed to the mountain to pray. Now, when evening came, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on land, and he saw them straining at the rowing, for the wind was against them. So Jesus sends these guys ahead, and he sends them ahead on their own. And I can imagine that they were pretty stoked with what had just happened. And so their inclination would have not been to separate themselves from Christ. They probably didn't like the idea of him sending them out. They didn't like the idea of them leaving him. I mean, they'd just seen this incredible miracle. They would want to stay with the Lord. But guys, we have to understand that when the Lord tells us to go, we need to go. And there's purpose and there's reason in it. And while we would be more comfortable if we would stay, sometimes he says go. And these are all times that are part of the growth that he has for the plan in our lives. Many years ago, it's been a lot of years ago now, one of the first jobs that I had when I was in high school, really good jobs, was I worked for this old peanut farmer by the name of E.E. Outlaw. The company was called E.E. Outlaw and Sons. I never saw any sons, and I never figured out what E.E. stood for, but the man lived up to his last name. He had taken and moved from being a peanut farmer into being a heavy equipment provider to job sites within the Chesapeake and Suffolk and Virginia Beach area. And what he would do is he would hire high school kids, and he would train them how to run heavy equipment, and then he would send them out and charge prevailing wages for youngsters and then pay about half of what the cost of a real serious operator would be. So he was making bank, but I wasn't complaining because at that point in time, I think at that time at 16, I was making like $10 an hour. Man, it was big bucks. And for a summer job, man, it was great, especially for a kid that had a hot rod habit. I needed the money. And it was interesting because one of the things that would take and would happen is I remember being terrified at any given moment of making a mistake because first off, I was young, I was very inexperienced, and although he would show me once how to run the equipment, then he'd pretty much so turn me loose. He assured me that if I did my best, that it would always work out. And so every day was just a matter of doing what I had never done before. Show me once, turn me loose. After my first summer, I started to see how his lack of direction was really something that was very useful. He trained me to run the equipment, and he trusted me. And what he told me is, he said, don't break it. Don't you break my stuff. But you use your judgment, and you do the best you can every day. Be careful, and you'll be all right. See, he knew he wasn't going to be with me to watch me and to do everything that was going to need to be done. He knew I had to learn how to trust myself. I had to learn how to trust what little he had done and shown me and be able to make application to it, looking to do the very best that I could do. And guys, I believe that Jesus is doing the very same with his disciples here. He trusts them to do what he has called them to do, and so he sends them ahead, even knowing that there's going to be difficulty, even knowing that they are going to struggle as they do. But it says that Jesus was praying and watching them struggle from a distance. One day, I was working around the farm, and there was a bunch of scrap in the back of a single-axled dump truck that needed to go to the boneyard. The boneyard was back on the South 40, and so I had to take it down these peanut roads and go across the irrigation ditches. And every one of the irrigation ditches for bridges had telephone pole bridges. No guardrails or nothing, just half a dozen or a dozen telephone poles thrown down, and you had to hit it straight in order to keep it across there. I made my way back to the boneyard. I dumped the load, and I was feeling good about everything that was going on. And I was driving back and going just a little bit too fast. And I missed the bridge. And I dropped the rear axle of this 5-ton dump truck in the hole. Had it standing up about like that. And I thought, man, I am so fired. And so fear of not wanting to lose my job and realizing that I needed to do something caused me to go ahead and run the 2 miles across the peanut patch to go pick up another piece of equipment to come back and hopefully rescue the truck out of the ditch, thinking that if I could get it out of there and I hadn't hurt it too bad and I could get everything back, I could do this before anybody came back to the farm and nobody would know. And so I ran across the field and I jumped into what was a brand new front end loader, a track, not a wheel. Do you know how long it takes to go 2.5 miles down a peanut road? Made my way out there, felt great, wrapped a chain around the back end of the truck, lifted it up, put it back in its place, moved it over to the side, drove the thing back. This is taking forever. Parked it, went back, got the truck, drove down the path in such a way that I was trying to erase the track marks with the truck. Pulled the truck back, jumped up and down on the running board because it had really taken a big tweak when it went into the ditch. And I'm about ready to hose down the front end loader, and here comes EE into the yard. I'm thinking, man, do I tell him? He comes walking up. What you up to? Oh, just, and I decided to come clean, so I recounted the whole story to him, right? And he started smiling, he started grinning. I told him, man, I got to tell you what, I was scared to death, and I know I wasn't supposed to use the front end loader. It's brand new, and I'm not checked out on it yet, but I figured I needed to get the truck out of there. And he goes, I'm really glad you told me. I said, yeah, I said, me too. And I thought, okay, here it comes. He goes, I want you to know I was watching you the whole time. I said, from what point? He said, from the point that you took that corner too fast and dropped that truck in the irrigation ditch. He says, I thought to come help you. I thought that I would go ahead and come down and help you. He said, but I wanted to sit and watch and see what you would do. He says, you did exactly what I would do. He says, good job. And he didn't even back up and tell me about how much of a bonehead I was for dropping the truck in the hole in the first place. I guess he figured that I had beat myself up enough over that indiscretion, and so he allowed me to be able to feel like I had accomplished something. And in so he said, and I've got another job that I want you to start doing. And he set me up on one of the larger jobs for the rest of the summer, and I made tons of money. It was fabulous. And I really appreciated the fact that he was willing to take and allow me to be able to grow through even what were mistakes. But he was watching. And he saw that what's going on. And guys, this is what we need to understand. What Jesus is doing with them right now is he knows that they're rowing against the wind. He knows that it's a struggle. He knows that they are kind of in that place of thinking, wow, I don't believe that he left us out here by ourselves. I mean, they just came off the high of this incredible experience, of this great, and have you ever had something happen that was really good after something that was really bad, and now all of a sudden it gets really bad again, and you go, come on! Why can't it just stay good? Why is it that it's always hard? Has anybody else got an always hard for life? Jesus was watching as they were rowing. He had told them, go to the other side. They had their orders. They knew that he had the power and the ability to be able to govern and to control everything in the world. He'd spoke to the wind and made it stop. He'd spoke to a dead little girl and she got up. He had taken and just broke 2 fish and 5 loaves into a meal that fed thousands of people. And yet I can see them in the boat going, we're not going to make it. We're going to die. But Jesus was watching. Now about the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea, and he would have passed them by. And when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost, and they cried out, for they all saw him and were troubled. But immediately he talked to them, and he said to them, be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. Then he went up to the boat to them, and the wind ceased, and they were greatly amazed in themselves beyond measure, and they marveled. You think? So once again, the disciples find themselves rowing against the wind. And again, they would have been disappointed. It's hard. Don't like it when it's hard. In the middle of the struggle, they look, and they see Jesus, and I love what it says. He was walking in a manner to just pass them. Okay? He wasn't really going to stop. He was just making his way out. He was just walking. I'm just out for a walk. I'll just walk to the other side. I'll meet you guys there. And they freaked out. It's a ghost. It's a ghost? It's a boogeyman under the bed? I mean, what? It's a ghost. And they freaked out, and they're scared, and they're afraid. And so because of their position and their lack of faith, what Jesus does is he stops, and he walks over, and he says, be of good cheer, which means that they weren't of good cheer. What's the opposite of good cheer? I don't think there is such a thing as bad cheer, but there's no cheer. There's no uplifting of the heart. There's a desperation. There's a fear. He says, be of good cheer. It's me. It's just me. Don't be afraid. Jesus was watching, and he was walking along with them the whole time. The difference is, again, Jesus was just walking to make his way, but it also says that he was praying, that he was watching, he was walking right beside them in the struggle. Jesus knew all the time what was going on. And Christian, you need to hear this, and you need to lock onto this. You need to understand that everything that we walk through, everything that we struggle against, everything that is coming against us does so in plain sight and in view of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. He's walking right there with you. And if we can somehow translate that into our minds and understanding and recognizing and realizing that we're not alone. How many of you get scared when you think you're alone and you're on your own and something's coming against you? When you think you see a ghost or there's a monster under your bed? You're not alone. Jesus is watching. He's praying. He's walking right alongside you. And not only that, he's headed where he has told you to go. Now let me tell you what happens. The Lord will come and He'll tell you to do something, and you'll step out in faith. And you'll say, all right, Lord, I'm going to go do this. And as soon as you do, the enemy gets mad as hell. And the enemy starts trying to do everything he can to thwart you. The enemy starts trying to bring the waves up. The enemy starts trying to do whatever it is that he can do to cause you to be discouraged, to cause you to feel like you're not going to make it regardless of what the Lord has told you. The reality is Jesus is already on His way there. He's already going there. You're going to get there. The question is do you have the faith and do you trust Him that you're going to get there based on what He's told you? And the enemy's coming and going, you ain't going to make it. You're not going to make it. You don't have the strength. You don't have the resources. You don't have what you need to do this. Who are you to think that somehow or another that you're going to be able to do this? And we lose sight of the fact that Jesus is praying and that He's watching and that He's walking right alongside us, going to where we are. Now, here's the thing that I want you to really hold on to. If you're in the middle of a struggle, if you're in the middle of rowing against the wind, if you are having trouble in your life and difficulties are coming against you, and Jesus hasn't stepped into the boat, it's because He wants you to keep rowing. He wants you to keep going. He's not seen you to the point now to where you need to stop and think that you're going to fail. You need to trust that He is going to continue to have faith in you to do what it is that He sent you to do. And I think one of the biggest inhibitors that we have is that we don't have any faith in the fact that Jesus trusts us to do what He's called us to do. Now let me tell you what, He won't let you fail, but He'll let you get to the point to where you need to stretch past the point where you've been before. And that's sometimes where we fall apart. It's sometimes where we start thinking that there's not enough resource, that we don't have what we need, that there's no way that we're going to be able to accomplish this because, well, I can't. Guys, we need to understand, if we've been told to do something by God, if Jesus has told us to do something, then we need to have an attitude that says He can, and because He can, and because He is driving all of the resource behind me, then I can. Then I can. You see, so often we give up, and there's a quote, and I've heard it attributed to so many people. I don't know who it is, but I know that it was something that Warren Wiersbe used to say to his wife all the time, and he would say, honey, it's always too soon to quit. It's always too soon to quit. It's always too soon to quit in relationship to the things that we face in life. Guys, it is always too soon to quit. As a believer, as a Christian, we shouldn't have within our vernacular, we shouldn't have within our hearts and within our mindset this idea that it's okay to quit on what God has told us to do. Now, I don't know what God has told you to do. I know collectively what He has told the church to do, that we're supposed to minister, that we're supposed to reach, that we're supposed to love people, that we're supposed to share the gospel. So I know that there's this overriding theme of that which we are supposed to do, especially that which would affect the community in which we live. But I also know that there's personal things that God has told you to do in your life. He said, I want you to go to the other side of this, whatever it is. And you know what? You get in the boat. And you get in the boat and you start rowing. And guess what happens? The enemy starts going and blowing against you. And trying to make it as hard as he possibly can. And we're rowing. And we're rowing. And we're thinking somehow or another, it should be easier than this. God told me to go this direction. You know, one of the things that I've found about the instructions that God has given myself and others that I've witnessed throughout the course of the years of ministry is that He never says, do it and it will be easy. He just says, go do it, and I'll provide. Some of the best opportunities that we've ever seen in ministry have come with the hardest challenges. The scariest kind of circumstances to where everything's on the line. Lord, don't you care that we're perishing? And He's right there in the boat. I'm trying to learn in my life that if Jesus has sent us ahead, He's told me to do something, then I need to just keep rowing. I need to keep going in the direction that He has told us to go. 1 Corinthians 10 and 13, it says, "No temptation has overtaken you, except which is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make a way of escape that you may be able to bear it." No temptation. You know what the temptation is? The temptation is to quit. The temptation is to say, I can't. The temptation is to fall into this mindset of saying that I don't have what I need to do this, so therefore I can't do it. When God would say, that's the common temptation that is known to man, but with me, there's not anything that you're going to lack. Verse 52 says, "For they did not understand about the loaves because their hearts was hard-hearted." At first, this is just totally out of place. It's like, what? We're rowing in the boat. He gets in the boat. Everything's going fine. And now we're talking about the bread. They didn't understand about the loaves because they had a heart. Now, it first seems out of place, but really it fits perfectly. The point is one of not seeing God move from struggle to struggle. The point is in not recognizing that while they were out of gas and they needed rest, it wasn't about what their needs were, it was about the needs of others. They were done. Jesus said, you give them something to eat. They were done, and Jesus said, go on without me. They thought they were done, and the storm caused them to row against the wind. They thought they were done, and they saw a ghost walking on the water. The hardness of heart came by way of discouragement and a failure to trust in what Jesus had already told them. And guys, we have to so often go back and we have to remember what it is that God has done. We just studied this on last Wednesday. We talked about how it was so important that we listen and we remember what God has done in our lives. We listen for His voice and we remember what it is that He has done. Because so often what will happen is that we forget that He told us to go in the first place. And when we get to the point of being done, then we stop. And we give in to the temptation. When they crossed over, they came to the land of the Gennesaret. And they anchored there. And when they came out of the boat, immediately the people recognized them and ran through the whole surrounding region and began to carry about on beds those who were sick to wherever they heard He was. And whenever He entered into villages, cities, or the country, they laid the sick in the marketplace, and they begged Him that He might just touch the hem of His garment. And as many as touched Him were made well. The need for Jesus is never ending. He's called us, and He sent us to bring people to Him so that they can receive the touch that they need in order to be healed. It's going to require hard work. And it's going to require that we row against the wind. But He sent us. And again, I don't know what this means purposely or personally in your life specifically, because it has application, obviously, again, to the church as a whole, but it has application to you individually. There are things in your life that Jesus Christ has told you that He wants you to overcome, that He wants you to take and to move from this side to the other side. It may be an area of faith. It may be an area of healing. It may be an area of something, again, that falls into that category of an addiction or an affliction or something that is going on between your ears and the gray space that takes place up there that's causing you not to enter into the place of peace and assurity in the way that God wants you to in His plan of salvation for you. It may be, as we discussed in a recent message, the fear of man. Maybe you're afraid of stepping out into some place that you've never been before when Jesus has told you to go. Oh, but I can't. I don't have enough. How in the world can I feed this many people? Jesus says, bring me what you got. What do you got? What do you have? And when we are willing, whether it be a lot or it be a little, to give Jesus everything we have, then we'll see exactly what it is that He's planned, and we'll reach the other side. Amen?